and record. Good morning, and welcome to Bite Size Conversations today with me, Kylie Mowbray Allen from Hello Media, and I'm zooming in from Bangalore today on the north coast of New South Wales, and I'm joined with Jenni Walke I'm not sure there, from Elephant in the Room Consulting. You can't see her, but you will be able to see her in a moment because I'm going to share my screen and you'll see her little smiling, beautiful face just there. And our topic today is cash flow. Hello, Jenni, how are you going?
I'm doing really well. Thanks, Kylie. Hello, everybody. I'm driving from Middlemount to Emerald in central Queensland. So sorry I can't be there on video, but I'm definitely here on voice.
So where is that exactly, Jenni? It's quite far away, isn't it?
Yeah, Emerald is around, Middlemount's about 3 hours from Mackay. So inland or about an hour south of Emerald. So that kind of central North Queensland.
Wow. Is it warm?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's been chilly last night, but it's about 20 degrees. Sun's out. There's no fog today, so it's been a really beautiful day.
Gorgeous. And what are you off to do today, Jenni?
So I'm actually flying home. I was up here yesterday with one of my clients. We had a meeting with some traditional owners and had a really beautiful day working with them yesterday, and incredibly blessed actually, because that was a little bit impromptu. That was just beautiful and felt really blessed to actually.
We seem to have lost. Are you back?
Are you there now? Yeah.
Yes.
I stopped talking and you stopped talking. That's the joy, because we can't see each other's mouths. So we don't know when we stopped talking.
No, we haven't been able to hear you for a while. So I wasn't sure if you were there or what was happening. But let's get stuck into let's get stuck into cash flow, Jenni. So while you've got some coverage there, chat with us about, we mentioned last week that cash flow is pretty much the biggest issue for most small and medium businesses. And so what can you share with us from your perspective in dealing with your clients about how that goes for you? Oh, we seem to be having some challenges with the zooming in.
Strange if you can't hear me. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you again now. Great.
Yeah, it's so weird. I've got full bars, so it's a bit strange. I'm just pulling over because I'm on my road, so we've got plenty of time. So cash flow is so important in business, because the issue we have is cash flow determines your ability to keep the business afloat, to keep those lights on, if you like. And so managing cash flow, particularly those first couple of years of business where you feel like you've kind of king and pauper in the same day, can become really challenging, and is often one of the biggest reasons that business owners decide to close their business.
King and pauper in the day. You've said it so well. It's so right, isn't it? It really is such a big thing. And in the very, very early days of business, I was told you need to be putting something aside each day from what you're bringing in, and it wasn't very specific. But the best time came when I actually registered for GST about a year later, and they said, set up a separate bank account, and every time in comes an invoice or in comes an order, like particularly with wholesale where there's the GST there, put that GST in a separate account, and then you never have to worry when it's time for your BAS, etc. And then they said, have an extra little account that's just got a tiny amount, it might be just 5% of each thing that comes in, that sits in that little account, and then that's your little buffer. So that has been a really massive winner for me, whether I was in my e-commerce business or in this company.
And that's and it's such great advice. It's such an important thing to do. And to be honest, when I started my business, I didn't do that, because when as we all know, I started with very little in the business. It was kind of like, oh my God, is this going to work? And so I didn't have the luxury of that cash flow very early on.
So,
and
sorry.
I didn't learn that till about 2 years into business. Are you there?
Yes. So what did you do, Jenni? How did you keep going obviously you need to have something in the bank because you're still going to pay groceries and your internet bill, for example. So a little bit of personal, a little bit of business. So what did you do for the juggle?
It literally was a juggle, and it caused a fair bit of stress. But and I know this is going to sound silly, but what I did is I actually just used to work out, okay, what are the bills coming up? So I was very aware. What that process did is made me very aware of what my bills were and what I was spending my money on. And I think by having that limited cash early on, it actually made me far more aware of what I was spending money in the business on. So I was a bit frugal, and I was a little bit kind of like, do I need this expense? Is it going to add value to my business? Is it going to help my family? And if it answered those two questions, we would juggle the money to fit that. But what it enabled me to do is to be really critical and aware of the expenses. And as we started to grow, while I'm probably not as frugal as I was back then, I am still aware of that conversation around, is this expense, is this purchase adding value? Is this going to help us move towards our goals? And if it is, then it's a good expense. If it's something that's just a little bit frivolous, it's a different conversation.
Yes, that's a really good one. Is it necessary for my business right now? Or can it be on my list for in 6 months' time or in a year's time? Do I need it right now for the operating of my business?
Exactly. And we don't often think about that. I think when I look at businesses who started businesses with a good amount of cash in the bank and a lot of investment. And in fact, I was listening to a podcast or an article recently by Jim Collins, who was talking about the fact when you see Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who come in with huge amounts of venture capital, they actually are slower to innovate because they don't have that pressure. They don't have that need to try and kind of make things work because there's lots of money in the bank. And so what it does is, while it can be a little stressful, that pressure of how am I going to get my money, what am I spending my money on, actually creates innovation, because you have to find ways to work in a far more effective, more productive and lower cost way. And you come up with new ideas and things that you wouldn't have done had you had huge amounts of cash flow in your business. And that really resonated with me, saying, well, actually it is. I found different ways to run my business, and I share those knowledges with my clients around, hey, you don't need to buy that. You can use the free version of that software. You don't need to go and buy expensive software to do certain things in your business. You can look for alternatives.
Yes, it makes perfect sense that if you have got it all, sitting there, you've got a backstop in effect, then yeah, you don't have that same pressure and that same drive perhaps. So yeah, that's definitely an interesting take on that. I also think the importance of remembering where you're going to invest the bits that come in. So you and I are both, always on the same page with this, is that we want to invest in upskilling and, improving what we offer and all of that. So yeah, it's really, really interesting, isn't it, where we choose to spend those bits coming in.
And I think cash flow is one of those things that can be the devil or it can be a savior for you. I think if you think about cash flow as simply about managing cycles, so you have to work out when you need to pedal faster, you need to work out when you need to slow down. So rather than seeing cash flow as a negative, and a lot of people refer to cash flow in a kind of negative, stressful way of having to manage cash flow. But if you actually just say that the cash flow in your business and the cycle of your business allows you to actually identify where the peaks and troughs, and as I said, when you're king in the morning and a pauper in the afternoon because the bills come out, that's okay if you're aware of it. Because the biggest downfall for businesses is the unknown.
Yeah.
Right? We're not knowing that uncertainty, and I don't know what's happening. But if I have clarity around when my bills are coming out, when I'm expecting to get money coming in, and we can manage that in and out, it actually allows you to create growth, and it actually facilitates growth, because you can actually say, hey, this is a period of time where we don't have a huge amount of expenses. We're going to have a little bit of extra cash. So now's the time to do that investment. And that allows you to plan and actually really approach your business in a far more strategic way, rather than kind of, let's just see how it goes. Did you get that?
Some of it you're cutting out.
It's so funny. I'm not moving. I'm literally sitting I pulled over. I'm in the same spot, and I'm gotta love internet, because I'm watching the bars on my phone go up and down depending on the cars that drive past the vehicle.
Oh.
So apologies for those listening today. This is a slightly odd one, but welcome
Yeah.
like technology and our amazing internet in the Middle East.
From an Australian internet, we curse it a lot, that is for sure.
So tell me about how do you manage your cash flow in your business? Because you're like mine, a service businesses, but you also have a larger staffing pool. Like you've got a couple more staff than me. So how do you manage your cash flow with your staff?
So I have 5 team members. I always make sure that I've got at least 2 weeks worth of wages sitting, or 2 months, sorry, sitting aside. So should anything happen, that's sorted, which is good. I also make sure that I always have that extra account for the GST that I put aside, and that extra account where I just put sometimes 5%, sometimes 10% in of every invoice that comes in. So it's just sitting there hanging out. But definitely, there are leaner times, and there, oh, what did you say? Pauper and
King.
King. I love it. I'm going to say Prince and Pauper, the princess and Pauper. There's definitely times like that. But like we talked about last week, I've really learned that I have particular months that are really good months. And then there's months that are, quieter months in terms of bringing on new people and things. So it's definitely, I feel, the longer you're in business, the easier it is to manage of what's going to be happening with the ebb and flow of your business. And
100%.
one thing I've noticed is that with my clients is that when they're going through a bit of an time of a leaner time, perhaps, sometimes that'll be the time that they think they've got to stop spending money, whether it's on ads, etc. And I'm like, actually, this is the time where you need to really put into it, because we've got to change. We've got to get over this little hump. So we've got to look at ways that we can bring some in. So what I really love suggesting to them is, hey, let's do a big clearance sale. Let's do a 10% off or 30% off for 48 hours or something, and just bring a little bit of extra cash in. And because at the end of the day, you need to spend money to make money. So yeah, putting something out there, putting it out as an ad or something to bring in extra new things, new sales, etc. It's a really great way to bring in some extra cash.
And I think it's, and as we talked last time, I think that's a really important thing to consider, is that some people often think, oh gosh, I don't want to sell my stuff at sale because I'm reducing I'm not going to have that money and I'm not making money. But actually, your business doesn't have to, it's not about making the maximum profit every single day if you're managing cash flow in that way. Sometimes it's actually clearing out inventory is an opportunity to create cash in the bank that allows you to refresh your inventory. And that then boosts your cash flow because you get new stock, new things in the store, or new offers that you can provide. And it actually refreshes your customer database at the same time. So I completely agree that running those sales and running sort of end of financial year or run out deals like they do on vehicles, even when it's the old, boost your cash flow in the short term, but also create that cycle for your clients. So it actually allows you to refresh and and start to bring in new things and innovate about what you want to offer.
Yes, totally. That's a really, really good one. Something you said last week that I thought was fabulous and worth reiterating today is that you said when it's quiet times, that's a really good time, not to feel stressed about it, but to actually start doing some planning. And if you know in advance, this is going to be my quiet month, then either take some time for your holiday then, or actually take that time to be planning and preparing the next big exciting thing that you're going to be introducing.
Exactly. In fact, we're doing that right now in our business. We've had 3 or 4 very large clients over the last 6 months. They're all kind of coming to an end, and those contracts are coming to the end in terms of the bulk work we're doing now, with some report writing and some assets that we're sharing back with the client. And at the end of June, I'm actually taking job. Business came to us, obviously, but we've got capacity and able to do it. But what it allows us to do is we're taking stock in July about what we want to do for the next financial year, where the business wants to grow, what type of clients we actually want to work with, and reflecting on all the jobs that we've done. So we know July is going to be a slightly leaner month for us. But we also have some, that kind of stock or core products or core clients that we're working with. And then everything else on top of that is actually will either be gravy, but we're not expecting that. We're expecting July to be a quiet month to give us time to refresh, review our plans for the year, but also then decide where do we want to play and where do we want to advertise in the next financial year.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm so excited, and I think it's the first time I've said in my whole life that I'm so excited about a new financial year. But I just feel it's fresh and it's a chance to look at things. You know, we just had on Wednesday this week, we had a CEO day. We worked on lots of things behind the scenes, which just felt really good, clearing things up. And I just saw a post that we've had here from someone that's listening in live that says, I know a business that went under as the bookkeeper didn't put the GST aside, and when they had to pay for it, there wasn't the money for it. Just shocking, which absolutely it is. So not having anything set aside is a really stressful thing to deal with. And are we trying to make business easier for us, or life easier for ourselves, or are we trying to make it harder? And clearly none of us really want to make it harder, right? So making sure,
Very true.
at the very least, putting that GST aside, or putting that that tax aside is incredibly important.
And it's much easier. It's a much easier thing to do if you're a service-based business. I know a lot of people think that's a strange statement, but if I'm selling my coaching, I always talk about my products and everything being ex-GST. And I do that because I'm working with businesses offering it as ex-GST. It's educating them that there's a core cost, and there's that GST component that you don't own, that doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the government. And it's actually the expense to your business is the core value of the product. So let's say it's a $6,000 program. That $600 GST is actually just extra. You have to pay it to the government. The government will pay it back to you if you end up, spending more. If you're spending more of your GST than you've actually earned. But by constantly positioning your stuff as ex-GST and talking about your revenue in that way, it allows you to be really clear about, okay, my revenue this year has been 500,000 excluding GST, or 200,000 excluding GST, and very clearly you're not overestimating the value of your business, but you're also not overestimating that potential cash flow into the business as well.
Sorry, can you repeat that, Jenny?
Hello. Yeah, I was just saying that when you're estimating the value of your business, you should always do it ex-GST, because the GST component doesn't belong to you. It's a government tax. So therefore, when I'm promoting my products, I talk about it being ex-GST. There's a 10% on top of that goes out, but we're not overestimating the potential cash flow if we're excluding that GST component from our conversations and our financial discussions.
That's such a good point. And Christopher, who's listening in, has said, great point about the ex-GST distinction. I need to take that on in my business, which I totally agree with Christopher. Just making it really clear and speaking about it in that way makes it clear for others, but also really clear for yourself, which is great. Yeah, absolutely. So cash flow, yes, definitely a really big one. I'm not sure if you heard, Jenny, or saw, I think it was I just saw it on YouTube, but I think it was The Project. They were talking about what's going on in the building industry and all these companies just going down, which is just devastating for people getting houses built, or, just obviously just everybody. It's a really, really tough time out there in some industries. And what this one guy was saying from the Master Builders Association is that the problem is those big companies have such really small margins. So, and those fixed pricing when you got to build a house or whatever. So when you don't have anything as a bit of a buffer, and then those cost of goods go up, you're really in an absolute pickle. And
one of my clients, actually, I have a client of mine who works on incredibly tight margins, and the same thing happens in the labor hire industry, where the business is established on less than 5% margins for the bigger contracts because they're looking at volume. And it's for labor hire, construction, the building industry, all those industries working on any margins that are less than a source to play in when we're talking including your expenses with your cash flow, because everybody ends up being really tight with their margins so they can actually win the contracts, and it creates risk in the business.
Absolutely. It's really tricky, isn't it? So I think cash flow comes back to not just thinking, crikey, what cash have I got sitting in the bank that I've got to play with or whatever, but it's also really about that forward planning. and making sure those margins aren't too small, that you are allowing for movement in terms of what your cost of goods are, etc., to get your product out there or to offer your service, etc. So yeah, I think the big one here is planning and
head west on Thierry Road.
Oh, sorry, that was very odd. My phone just decided to talk to me randomly because I'm sitting here for too long, probably. Yeah, so no, it is about planning. I mean, ultimately, we talk a lot about, I mean, all these conversations that we have every Friday, whether it's about pricing, whether it's about strategy or structure or goal setting, all these things is about creating the right habits for your business early on. And as you've done with your business, that set aside account for GST, your 5% rainy day fund, and having your wages set aside, those things are just really good habit that we actually need to get involved and get our businesses in the mindset of when we start. And we have to remember, though, that our revenue for our company is not ours. And we often forget that. We have to be really mindful that it belongs to the company, right? And so our primary purpose is to manage the company's finance and to keep it running, whether you're a sole trader, whether you're a hobbyist, or whether you're running a Pty Ltd company. That revenue that comes in is that is there to pay for the ongoing delivery of the business. How we manage that is actually not about us individually. It's not about what we're gaining out of it. It's not about our profit, and it's not even really about the wages we're taking out of it. The purpose of that company is to keep generating revenue and being able to pay yourself from that revenue to say that the company has earned this, and then what am I going to take out of it? That's a secondary conversation. But I so often see people come in and say, you know, we've earned all this great money, and they don't think about that back end expenses and the ongoing costs required to run the business. So it does take really good planning, really good habits like you've created to make sure that you can sustain, you know, life as a business.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It's the habits, it's the planning. Cassandra Jones, who's here in the Zoom room, she said our Indigenous enterprise relies a lot on grants, which sometimes are very competitive. That's such an important one. I have a client who is in I can't say what the space, but anyway, it's a really intense space, absolutely 100% needed, and completely relies on grants and donations. And she just heard from the government a couple of months ago that they were wiping that side of what they were supporting, and that there would be no more grants, etc. And that's literally just wiping out this entire sector that is so desperately needed. So, you know, she has to go looking elsewhere for the money. But wow, when it just becomes so touch and go about, can you even survive with what you're offering? It's really tricky.
And I know, and Cassandra's point is so true. And I mean, I work with being an Indigenous business myself, and spending a lot of time and working with a lot of Indigenous businesses, especially new businesses. One of the things we always talk about is how do you actually build a revenue pipeline for your business that sits outside of the grant funding. So there's the grant funding and the opportunity. We take that as an opportunity to build and boost your revenue, not as your revenue. And I think I've got an amazing client that I work, and she's in the grant space, but she's a not-for-profit doing healthcare work. And so the specific programs, and she's programming the program, what she's doing. So she's bidding for large groups, deliver program work, and she's designed that deliver that. So that's a different grant funding model. But the smaller model that says, look, you know, I can't start my business until I get this grant, or I can't do this work until I get this grant, I think is misunderstanding the value and the use of the grants. The business should be able to survive on its own as a commercial business. We're not talking not-for-profits, but commercial businesses should be able to stand alone without grant funding. And the way that you do that is about being innovative about the products you're selling and making sure you're meeting that market. Now, even in the Indigenous space, that happens regularly as a consulting work, labor hire, recruitment services, you know, physical products. We can do those without having huge amounts of cash flow. You just have to be really mindful and planned about how you deliver your business. So I completely understand Cassandra's point about the funding and the grant applications and things like that. But back to the point is, your business should be commercially viable, and grants should boost us, not sustain us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Christopher did something really good, which is I have a reasonable idea of ongoing expenses in a list, to make it easier to grasp, I'll put it into a visual graph format. So that's the important thing, isn't it? Is figuring out what's the best way for you to be able to understand your business better and what's going on. And so we're using this amazing, well, we use Xero, so that in itself is a good thing. But as we all know in business, we all have a whole lot of subscriptions and things like that we have coming out, whether it's from our iTunes, whether it, that kind of subscriptions, or platforms, with things like Netflix, whatever it is. There's a lot of subscriptions coming out, internet, etc., etc. So aside from Xero, we have this other platform that we use, which we actually pay for. So yet again is another subscription, but it's really great. It has every single subscription listed in there, so that A, we can check out what we've got, and if we're just doubling up or got too much going on, but B, exactly what date it's coming out, etc. So that was really a massive help in managing that cash flow and knowing which weeks are the bigger weeks where more comes out and which weeks are the less weeks, and not less, the lighter weeks. So it's a really, really good one. So yeah, I definitely recommend whatever it is for you, whether it's a spreadsheet, whether it's whatever, like a subscription, things like what we use, that it actually really clearly tells you what you've got going on so that you can stay on top of it.
Exactly, and maybe we'll share the link of what that product is into the chat today, because a tool like that, it might have a cost associated with it, but if it's actually saving you money because you're able to look and analyze and see where you're spending, I think is a really important thing. Whether it's a graph, whether it's a spreadsheet, however it is, agreed. Being on top of your expenses and knowing what you're spending your money on is so important in business and managing your cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely. So managing it, planning for it, putting stuff aside so that you've got some buffer there for you. All of those things are just so important. So thank you everyone for joining us today. There's been some great comments in the chat. Also, Keely has said, so right, in the first year it's full of firsts and your budget is very much a guess. In your second year you have an idea of expenses. I totally agree. As you go on, it gets easier to manage. But then of course we get curveballs, we get the pandemic, we get the floods, we get the fires, there's all the things that come. So I guess the main learning is have something as a backup that's actually going to see you through. It was my accountant that said to me a long time ago, have 3 months sitting there at any one time so that you can continue on. That if anything happened, you've got 3 months to just keep you going. And I thought that was such great advice.
And it is a really good advice, and that's definitely something to work through when you're in a business, is to set up those cash flows. But we do recognize that if you're in the first couple of years of business, you're probably in proper land every day, and that's okay, as long as you actually making sure that you're still delivering the work, still being able to sell the product and managing those expenses. Be innovative, find different ways to run your business leanly, because if you can run your business lean, as soon as you actually start getting higher revenue in and you can actually start to access some of those different tools and techniques and products, you actually become more effective and more efficient in the way that you work. So being really mindful of that, I think, is definitely the way to go and to grow your business. But such a great chat today, Kylie, and the different tips in the comments. Thank you so much for sharing in the chat all the great comments today.
Yes, I agree. That was really great. Jenny, it's such a thing that many of us don't want to talk about. It's not a comfort space for a lot of us, but it's a real thing. We really definitely have to look at it. I'll just let you all know before we zoom off, or zoom away, is that the platform that we're using is called Track My Subs. There's lots more out there, but yeah, that's the one that we use, Track My Subs. It's really
awesome. Definitely look at that.
Keeping track of things for sure. Well, guys, thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you next week for a bit more bite-sized conversations, and we'll be sharing our topics.
Thanks so much.
The week. All right, everybody, and we'll stop the recording and we'll have our little bit of coaching for those that are in the room with us. So thanks, everybody. Great.
Thanks so much.
And have a wonderful day.